like to welcome all our clients and friends to our webinar. Thanks for joining us today. I think we've got some great content. We're going to be talking about you've been hacked, now what? And this is kind of a lesson in cyber incident response. A little bit of AMP before we get going here. We take a cloud-first approach to managed IT services, and we focus on helping our clients adopt a modern workplace. And we do that using Microsoft 365 and Microsoft's Azure cloud products. Our client security is our top priority and something we take very seriously. We've been doing this since 1984 and primarily support small and medium businesses in the Philadelphia, Delaware Valley here, ranging from 20 to 500 PCs. So let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. First, what are common cyber attack paths look like, and what are the bad actors doing to kind of set their ransomware stage? And then we're going to talk about how you can teach your employees to become human firewalls, so to speak. You know, what are the best ways to organize your response if, in fact, there is a cyber attack taking place and you detect something's going on? What are the best methods for investigating an attack, and then what to do after the attack? And when do you contact your cyber insurance provider if, in fact, there's an incident taking place? And once an attack is contained, how can you reduce the risk from future attacks? So a lot on our plate here today. We'll get going, and then, of course, at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So how often do cyber attacks occur? Well, unfortunately, this isn't great news. 71 million people are falling victim to cyber criminals every year. 71 million in a country with 350 million people in it. That to me is kind of an astonishing number. And 30 million small and medium businesses have had at least one cyber incident between 2021 and 2023. So in the last 2.25 years, 30 million people business-wise have been attacked. And then 95% of the cybersecurity attacks that do take place are based on human error. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. And then, unfortunately, cybercrime pays. And because it pays big time, you can see the numbers are growing, and I don't see any end in sight to this. So there's a couple common ways that a cyber criminal will try to attack a small, medium business. The first is, and the primary one, is phishing attacks. So they're sending emails out, they're calling you, they're sending any kind of trick they can to trick your employee into giving up their user ID and password. And that's what phishing attacks are all about. They're very effective, and it's very important that we teach our employees, to be on the lookout for this attack. The second are for clients, small and medium businesses that are allowing their employees to work at home with home PCs as opposed to a corporate device. Those home PCs, the kids are using them, and goodness knows what the actual IT cybersecurity hygiene is of a home PC. I can guarantee you it's not as good as a corporate-owned IT device. So allowing home PCs to touch your network can become problematic because it's easy at these game sites for the bad guys to load malware files onto home PCs that don't spring into action until they log into your corporate network. And then finally, brute force. Over on the dark web, all of our user ID and credentials are for sale. Now typically it might be my email address, but with a password that I was using 15 years ago. And so what they'll do is they'll buy those credentials, and then they'll come over to the AMP website, and then they'll try a variation number 1, and then variation number 2, and then variation number 3 on the credential they purchased. This is called brute force. There's software that does this. And so that's why it's so important we set up your Microsoft tenancy so that after a couple of bad tries at your user ID and password, we're letting you know it's time to change your password. So kind of what are the cyber criminals up to, and kind of what's the end game for them? Well, the FBI says, and this is really a scary fact, and we've actually seen this at AMP when a non-client calls us up and asks for help, and we start looking around in their network. Bad actors will gain access to your corporate network, and they will not immediately attack you. Instead, they're going to be in your network for at least 6 months. It's called dwell time. And the bad actor will be in there undetected, trying to figure out what are your server credentials so they can elevate their credential list, or they might be in there trying to figure out how they can log into your bank account or log into your accounting software and find out how much money you have in your bank statement. So the key here is for them to try to find a way to get from a user level of credential up to an administrative level of credential. And to do so, they have to move laterally or sideways from their PC to one server to the next server to the next server. And this lateral movement is monitored by A&P. We install software that documents all user ID and passwords coming into the server. Not we, the cybercriminal will install password gathering software on a PC, or they'll stick it on the local area network and just sit there and quietly gather user IDs and passwords so they can continue to laterally move around a network. And then another thing a cyber criminal is going to try to do is turn off any security tools that you have in place. Maybe your antivirus. Try to turn off your endpoint detection and response software. And it's really kind of a cat and mouse game where A&P, we are constantly monitoring to make sure the tools we put in place are actually active and working. But if we see something happen to us, it's a quick indicator that something's going on in the network. And then one of the holy grails for a cyber criminal is to gain control of your backups. And the whole idea is ultimately, what they want to do is encrypt your data. And once it's encrypted, they can either steal it, or they're going to ask for a ransom payment for you to get the encryption key back to unencrypt the data. And typically, they're never going to get paid if your backups are good and you start to use your backups and can recover all the encrypted data on your own. So they're going to try to gain control of your backups such that steal the control away from you, so that even though the backup might be viable, you don't control it anymore. You can't use it to recover the encrypted data. So how's A&P go about detecting attacks in real time? This is so important that we're able to do so. So we have deployed automated tool sets across all of our managed workstations and servers that are proactively monitoring for bad guy activity. And whenever we see something that looks indicative of some kind of cyber attack, and that suspicious activity is detected, we'll create a ticket. And then once we create a ticket, we'll go out and scan the PC. Is there any malware on there or anything else on there? And if so, we're going to quarantine it. If the quarantine's not successful, and our software will tell us if that's the case or not, then we're going to proactively remove the device from the network. So if we get a bad actor who's on a laptop off your network, they really can't harm the rest of the employees or the server data. The challenge is to recognize that you need to get that device off the network. Once all that's been done and we feel like we've contained things, we'll inform our client. And then if we confirm there really has been a successful attack, we're going to open a cyber insurance incident with your carrier. And we'll do that with you on a conference call with your carrier. So there's three things a cyber policy will provide that are really critical components. It provides more than this, but these three things are perhaps the most important. The first is we want to quickly establish client attorney privilege. The minute we find out an incident has occurred, we want you and your leadership team to start talking to your attorney. By doing so, if the incident got to be really bad, if it became national news, one of your clients sues you, but by establishing client attorney privilege early, you don't have to answer questions regarding the incident response after you start talking to your attorney, because you can claim client attorney privilege, which shields all those conversations and all the activities away from anyone trying to sue you for information. So this is the first and most important thing we want to establish. And then second, we want to get a third-party forensic investigation going. So we don't want you and your IT company and your company to do it. Frankly, you're probably not trained to know what to look for or how to do the investigation. And nor do you want A&P as your service provider to do it, because we have a vested interest. And so we really want to have a third party take a look and take a peek under the hood at what's going on. And this is typically included in your cyber insurance policy, and it's typically included for free. It's part of the policy deliverable. But we want to get that established and get that investigation going as quickly as possible. And then finally, once the forensics has been taken care of, you're going to hire the MSP to clean up any of the blast damage. And that might be just one PC, might be a server, might be a couple of servers. Hard to say. It's different in every case. But all those charges are typically not part of a managed service agreement. But fortunately, the cyber insurance policies almost always pay for the third-party remediation. So these are three big things. There are other things like public relations. Hey, do we tell your employees? Do we tell the outside word, like your clients and vendors? And so these also become conversations. So what should an incident response plan look like? And we're going to go through it. There's multiple steps here. And really the great takeaway for you is your A&P virtual CIO is ready to discuss this with you and share this with you so that you can be, kind of on the watch and ready, God forbid something happens. But the first thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is when we detect something's going on or your employee feels like something's going on, the best thing to do is to turn off the internet that the device is on and power off your firewall and LAN switches. Now, do not power off the laptop, do not power off your servers, just shut down your local area network. And don't unplug any cables, just let all the cables be. But getting that firewall and internet turned off is very important, because once cyber criminals on your network and they have control of a device, the first thing they're going to do is phone home. And they're going to phone home to the cyber criminal site and say, hey, I'm at XYZ customer right now. I have breached access. And hey, send me some encryption keys. So we want to turn off all that communication so that the bad actor can't phone home and start layering software and services in place to help the cyber criminal gain a foothold. But at the same time that you're shutting down your internet and your local area network, you do not want to power off the PC that you think's infected or the server that's infected. And the reason for this is that we don't know what stage you are in the cyber criminals attack profile. And typically what the cyber criminals will do is they will load a script that's been pre-written and got downloaded from the internet. They'll load it on the server such that when the server's powered off and then powered back on, that's when the script is run, and that's when the encryption takes place. So they don't do it real time. They do it in a sneaky way. So on one hand, we never want to power off a server or a PC. We just want to get them off the network. And then the second thing is you don't want to power any of this stuff off because you kind of want to protect the crime scene. We imagine putting yellow tape around the murder victim. We want to put yellow tape around your PC, yellow tape around the server, and protect that environment so when the forensics investigator shows up, nothing's been messed with. You didn't run a backup and destroy the evidence, because frankly we want to know what happened, because we're going to be able to take proactive steps if we understand what did happen. The next thing is, while this is going on, you want to share with your employees that there's a cyber incident taking place. What you don't want to say is there's a ransomware attack or a cyber attack, because you don't know yet. And later on, the words you say early on will be used against you in a court of law if bad things happen. And so using the right language is so important. So what we want to call it is a cyber incident. You can tell your employees there's a cyber incident being investigated, and that's it. No other language like ransomware attacks or cyber attacks, because we just don't know what's what yet, and you don't want to be misquoted or somehow misinterpreted. And then once we know something's really going on, we're going to pick up the phone and call with us, with your IT provider. You're going to want to get your executive leadership team and your IT provider on a call with your cyber carrier to kick off an incident response. And like we said before, you want to consider what's happening here at a crime scene. So we don't want to rush to turn it to correct the PC, correct the server. We have to slow down and make sure we're doing things in a very methodical way. So, and to that point, we want to keep a log of the events, and by doing so, it'll allow the forensics investigator to really do a deep analysis of what devices got attacked, what didn't, to what extent we have to do a cleanup. And so it's kind of, I would say, kind of determining what the blast zone is. And then you're going to create a great team of people on this call with the insurance carrier. So like I said before, a forensics company will probably be brought in. Your managed service provider like A&P, a lawyer from the insurance company, your leadership team. They're going to be on every conference call so that all the affected parties kind of know what's going on and what each step is along the way. And like I shared before, you don't want to be very open with your employees, because your employees, and through no fault of their own, they're going to start talking to your clients. They're going to start talking to your vendors, and you're not going to be able to control the messaging. And if one of your employees says, hey, we don't have, I can't get you that report you want right now, Mr. Customer, because we're under a cyber attack, and that goes back to your customer, that goes back to your customer's purchaser or your customer's leadership team, and they're calling your CIO up going, I understand you're on a cyber attack. What's going on? Is my data at risk? And so on and so forth. So being careful with what you say and what you tell people is going to really matter as far as having a good outcome. And like I shared before, don't turn off stuff. Don't turn it back on. You'll be directed every step along the way from almost a micromanagement perspective on what to do. Okay, so what lessons can we learn after a cyber incident? Well, there's a gigantic postmortem knowledge that can be had, and you clearly want to hold a meeting with all the interested parties to kind of detect or discuss what happened. How did it happen? And how did the attack originate? Did an employee actually give up their user ID and password? Was there a brute force attack? Was malware inadvertently downloaded off a home PC? I mean, you name it. But whatever the answer is, and forensics will figure it out, these answers are going to determine next steps on how do we improve your company's security so it doesn't happen again. And with the whole idea being to create a plan and implement next steps to tighten things up. So there's a lot we can learn from this. So how do we reduce the risk of a future attack? Well, there's definitely some proactive things you can do here to help stop this from occurring. Microsoft will tell you that the number one thing you can do is deploy multi-factor authentication. And that stops 90% of attacks, because if your employee inadvertently gives up their user ID and password to a bad guy, when the bad guy types in the user ID and password, they don't have the multi-factor authenticator app on their cell phone. So they're not being queried, hey, is this a valid log on? But your employee is, and your employee is going to look at that and go, oh my God, I'm not trying to log in right now at midnight, and say no, and to stop the access. So MFA is a great and most important first step. The second thing is, we really want to be proactive at teaching your employees how to become human firewalls. In other words, how to detect when they're being phished. How to figure out on an email if this email is really coming from Amazon or if this email is just nonsense. And here at A&P, we send out monthly tests to all employees, trying to trick them into giving up their user ID and password, or tricking them to click on a link that will download some malware onto their PC. And if they do the bad thing, if we trick them, we log them, and then we make training available to them and make sure they're taking the training to learn what they did was bad. And then another thing is the whole state of cybersecurity is changing so quickly. It was a year or two ago, we would say to all of our clients, you have to have a good antivirus on your PC. Well, antivirus is no longer sufficient. I mean, you still need antivirus on a PC, but now what's happening is the cyber criminals have figured out antivirus is so good that they don't attack you at a file level. Instead, now what they're doing is they're trying to evoke scripts that run in the PC's memory. And it's what's happening in the memory of the PC that needs to be monitored. And antivirus doesn't do that. Antivirus is paying attention to files and the changing or morphing of files. So the new product that needs to be installed on everyone's PC is called Endpoint Detection and Response. It's a piece of software. Here at A&P, we use a product called SentinelOne, but there are many. There's 3 or 4 companies out there that sell an EDR product right now. And what these EDR products do is much like antivirus, they'll download everything that they need to pay attention to and worry about. But instead of watching the disk drive, they're watching what's being run in the CPU's memory. And the minute it detects something bad in memory, it'll raise its hand and tell us, and then try to quarantine out that process and stop it on the PC. So these are some really great next steps to really probably the 3 most effective steps to protect you from a cyber attack. So we have a couple of takeaways here for you. First, really having a written step-by-step cyber incident response plan is important. Making sure that all your key stakeholders in your business are aware of it, and teaching all of your employees to pay attention. If you think you've been attacked, or you think you were just requested an MFA request and you weren't trying to log in, raise your hand and tell someone. And it's so important. And we're not going to be able to prevent everything, even if we deploy everything perfectly, because we still have the variability, unfortunately, of your employees doing some knucklehead stuff. But what we can do is try to detect and remediate things as quickly as possible. And so having multiple layers of protection, especially MFA, we feel is essential. And we're not relying on one type of security product. We're relying on kind of layers of products that in case one fails, we have a backup that's also paying attention. And by doing so, we can create kind of real-time detection and response that really makes a difference. And then finally, be buying cyber insurance, have a good policy, and be prepared to use it if necessary. Here at A&P, we have a product we call Secure Cloud Advantage, and this is a managed service that we offer. And the whole idea here for us is to proactively manage your Microsoft 365 infrastructure and implement Microsoft's Zero Trust security stack. And that's a whole bunch of security best practices and applications, including MFA and EDR. And it also includes, paying attention 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And if you turn this stuff on with Microsoft, we'll establish it such that if Microsoft sees something going weird, they'll send an email to our ticketing program. We'll immediately create a ticket. And at night, our network operations center is paying attention. And during the day, our dispatcher is paying attention. And then just as a backstop, is we always want to have a cloud-based backup of all your data. So just in case there is a successful attack and all of your servers and all your data became encrypted, it's sure nice to have a backup that's up in the cloud that the bad guys can't see on your local area network, don't have access to it on your local area network, even if they have admin privileges, because we've copied it to a place they don't even know where to go look. So very, very important to have cloud-based backup. And again, always having that cyber incident plan ready and talking to your employees about what are the kinds of things that your PC feels and looks like when something's going sideways. These are really super helpful things. So, hey, thanks for coming.